All right, and we're back at it. What we learned, I think it was between the 21st and right now, and here we go. All right. I will also stop posting these because a lot of these you can see everything, and I'll make sure to page down so you can see it. But we'll just go over the important points, and then there are tools to screenshot capture if you need certain responses. Other than that, to make things more efficient, let's go. I think here we have autophagy numbers, and we will go into this perplexity chat as well, which is really good. But I think perplexity so far is beating ChatGPT in the responses it gives, like the structure, the research. At least from what I can tell, and it's the free version of Perplexity, maybe Pro, but it's definitely not the strongest version, and it's out competing ChatGPT here. We'll see. But so as far as this goes, the cool thing is by far exercise, especially HIIT while fasted, is definitely the strongest multiplier. You can see it here. You can also do caloric restriction, especially protein. So if you do not have protein, that is one of the strongest autophagy markers. And this is how you suppress mTOR. Heat shock seems to have more data than cold shock, which is good. In spermidine and urolithin A, kind of both. This is more data on autophagy. In urolithin A, mainly on energy. And if you go here, you can actually see, let's see. Yeah, so here is the kind of the number breakdown, and you can see here. Caloric restriction, spermidine has a lot, short-term fasting has a ton, and so does this acute high intensity. So when you stack those, you get 600, 700%, and some of them are cancellation, but some of them are synergistic, so it's awesome. And let's keep going here. Benefits of dry fast. There haven't been that many benefits of a dry fast over. I know there's a lot of people saying it's 3x. They don't get hungry during it because the moment you drink water, you break the fat, and you get hungry. The studies show that it is strong, but a lot more risk than reward. And usually, ancestorally, we would have had access to plants, some seafood, even like moss growing on there, some sort of water source with some sort of electrolytes. Not necessarily enough calories or protein, but we would have had enough to keep us going every day, unless you were in the desert. But again, one cool thing is all the sea, like you'll see seashores, kelp, moss, the forest, savannas, jungles, they're all green, which is awesome. That's like a good, go there. Desert, usually red, kind of sandy. Red is associated with do not go there evolutionarily, and so we probably will not. Statistically, anthropologically, we did not last long at all in the desert. So, usually a lot of the energy is devoted to survival at that point rather than autophagy. Is what studies currently show. I know there's anecdotes, but I'm just saying, based on what we have. For hypoxia, it goes, moderate exercise pretty much does nothing. So maybe 1 to 5 percentage points. Then you have exhale, a deep exhale can get to 85%, so that's a 15% percentage point drop. And then HIIT alone can get to 82%, so that's 18% drop. And if you do HIIT with hypoxia, there's several ways to do that, but you could get really low, and It's not shown here, but it is on the ChatGPT. We can get down to 74%. Anything below, which is like a 26% drop, anything below 85% is considered dangerous or unhealthy. So be that as you may, but those are the hypoxic stressors. And it is good when you're doing that to pretty much breathe a deep breath. So if you're panting, it's good to try to inhale as much as possible, and especially after recovery, because after recovery you can hear during intense exercise you might not be able to. So pomegranate seeds, which are per country standard the best, like in terms of fruit you can eat, they are available at Whole Foods. They have a ton of net carbs, so per 100 grams, even 1 tablespoon, you have like close to 2 grams of net carbs. So the best thing is to find like a bunch of plants from even outside, like in the wild, like a little soil, and then buy a lot of Whole Foods organic plants, like even green onions, like leeks, etc. Just cut up little parts you have, lactobacilli, some natural cultures there, and you ferment them. So the fermenting will take down the sugars. It will hopefully, if you do it wild, up the chance you get Gordonobacter. If you get Gordonobacter, you are in the clear, because if that colonizes, which it's shown that a small percentage of what meat does colonize, you are golden, because now you have what it takes to convert urolithin A, and you just took a bunch of urolithin A naturally. So that's fantastic. mTOR, the biggest suppressions seem to be not having amino acids and not doing resistance exercise. So those are the strongest. So calories reduced, cut it by 50%. Do we have it? Yeah, at the most. But even if you're like working with nothing but just protein, you can still get a strong response if you do resistance training, like perfect, 3 to 5 sets, 10 reps, close to maximum exertion, and you are super calorically deficient, you will actually, given the protein, and if all your calories come from there, if it has enough leucine, and I think here we have, yes, it is, calories will only cut it by 50%, the signal like area under the curve almost. But here, if you have enough leucine, like this is the max cap, you're going to be fine. So you will actually generate the largest MPS increase. Now, if you're calorically sufficient or even a little bit in excess, you'll do 100% of that curve instead of 50%. So calories, so it's amino acids, resistance training, then way down is kind of calories, and then way down after that is carbs. Carbs only fuels the workout. And again, for plant, so whey, you need pretty much twice as much plant protein typically as a whey, which is extremely PCDAAS is super high, which means it's absorbed readily, easily. Probably the best, like goat kefir has like the highest. I think it has, if you look at the studies, goat whey has 141 PCDAS, and then if you ferment that, it usually goes 10 to 20% higher. So you're looking at, I mean, it could be as high as 170s, and that's the highest it goes. For most plant proteins, even the best ones, you're looking at 70 to 80 PCDAS. So, take that as you will. That's not such a bad thing for longevity. And then if you're doing a fast, any sort of, usually dry fast is around thirst, like if you're starting to thirst, which you shouldn't. Most people after the initial period, they don't. But if you start having any dry mouth, thirst, etc., that's a red flag, as well as any neurological symptoms that cascade to your heart, so palpitations, so any of those, like neurological, thirst, or even sudden hunger, associated with like shakiness, trembling, those are usually the red flags, as well as these. This means you need electrolytes, so that's not terrible. But yeah, this is more for dry fast. This is more for all of them. And I think Perplexity gives a better, yeah. So again, mainly around hydration for dry fast, which isn't a surprise. But here, like you'll see, some of these are all brain fog related, and then these are kind of, I'm really like heavy or tired, and then there's some around cold, and then again like the heart things. So there's a lot of overlap there, but those are the main ones where that means you cannot. And by the way, at fast, most people doing a fast, if they're keto adapted, they feel pretty dang good during the fast. So like really good. So you shouldn't be having really almost any of these at all. That's why they're science. And I can't say I've had any of them. Maybe initially as the keto adaptation, something like lightheadedness, but not any on FMD that in fact, this is the opposite. A lot of these are the opposite on FMD. Like I feel those are better than they were when I'm eating normally. So hopefully that helps someone. And then we're gonna see if there's more. Nope. Okay. Jump into kimchi. So here it's if kimchi smells alcoholic, the most ABV you're gonna consume in a tablespoon is like it's 1%. It's super low. It doesn't even reach 1 gram. You're not gonna get drunk. It's bottom line. You can eat it as long as all of these are not done. You can definitely eat it, and usually if you're having problems with the top because it's yeasty, which is fine, but if you are, you can go all the way to the bottom and it's going to be a lot less yeasty, which is great. Kombucha, you can drink it even for a year or more as long as it's again pretty much like this, doesn't have these molds, etc. But also if it, yeah, pretty much you can drink it. It's just going to be very acidic. Is the issue there, because the alcohol eventually will turn into acetic acid and it will make it very acidic, and at that point it's like drinking vinegar. If it burns your throat, probably not worth it. Can you do it? Yes, you can. I've done it, but it burns your throat. The aftermath is good. It actually helps, but it does burn your throat. So it's not bad as in pathogenic bacteria, put it that way. So you can do it. Okay, so going here, Perplexity, so it usually gives pretty good answers, even free, even without research. If it upgrades auto to pro like it does 3 to 5 times, it's, considerably better so far than ChatGPT. So I cannot imagine what the last tier is, where you have to pay $200 a month, because I think pro is $20 in here. I think, let's see, do we have, yeah, like max. So their max model must be insane. I don't at this moment, but anyways, so that's that. We did all of these. This we talked about already. How it doesn't really change that much from water fasting, at least per the studies. I know there's anecdotes saying 3x, but per the studies, and the risk is much higher. Yeah, hypoxia. Okay. So we're gonna take a quick peek and see if there's anything cool in the videos. Again, that's what we were saying, the 3x. Pomegranate, now they're delivering avocados by mail. So not just Whole Foods delivery, like by mail, Amazon proper. not Amazon, Whole Foods, which is awesome. Walter Longo here, he's curing MS, so he completely reversed MS in mice that did 3 days of FMD, 7 days off, like normal diet, 3 days on, 7 days off, and pretty much for 3 months. 20% were cured, the remaining 80% had significant reductions in symptoms for MS, and all across the board, like even for diabetes, autoimmune like Crohn's, and there's other studies, but here he talks about why that is, and it's when you go into mode 1 from eating normally, getting enough protein, etc., like we always do. If you're watching this and you're fortunate enough to have food and protein, if you don't, you go into mode 2, and mode 2 is a repair mode, which is excellent because you need mode 1 and mode 2 to live the longest life, and that's been shown again statistically, anthropologically, through look-back meta-analyses, so that's awesome. So it's people who live very long, they do fast every now and then, and it doesn't, again, it can be just an FMD where you're eating less, you're still satiated, you're still getting all the foods you want, just less of all of them, and then definitely less protein, and just doing 5 days of that, and it can be even 3 to 4 times a year, but that seems to be the key to longevity, which is pretty cool. Okay. And here they say do MS. Do MS for 7 days FMD, but 5 days were, in mice they did it for 3 days, and usually 5 days. The explanation is 4 days your gut microbiome does a large change. And so if you can extend it to 5 days, you definitely rebalance it as much as possible, which is awesome. So at least 5 days seems to be ideal. And again, it's very beneficial for cancer as well, which is not surprising. But it is very cool. Okay, going into these here, so more ChatGPT stuff. So this is how much protein the mice got per day. Like if you were to convert this out, like this would be the human equivalent. You would get this. So on a 2,000 calorie diet, you would get a third of that, around, and then you would get this many calories or this many grams of protein, which is not a lot. It's like 0.3 grams of protein per kilogram per day. So, which is the whole goal. Perplexity is doing so well. My experience of it, and it seems to train on its own data, but it also leverages the models of others to build it, which the other models train on their data. So yeah, it probably outperforms pretty well. So when you're looking at refeeding, the best seems to be that you want to go low carb, pretty much glucose goddess still, like mostly cooked greens, and then followed by a super small meal, followed by if again the plant-based way, which is cool, is the pretty much fats and protein. So you're gonna want to go with nuts and seeds. Again, go with the ones you can, but one of the cool things, and we'll get into this, is when you refeed, you're starting from scratch in a way. It's like a mini scratch, and when you start from mini scratch, you can introduce other foods at a very small amount, and your body will get used to them because the microflora is like new, and it actually replicates what kids undergo when their microflora is new and they're under 1 year of age, and we'll look at that. But when they're fed things like egg, milk, things that they might react to and they're known to react to, peanuts, they're actually less reactive both short and long term than kids that don't get it. So here is probably an opportunity to reintroduce foods that maybe you couldn't tolerate at a small amount, and then you very likely will be able to tolerate, especially if they're fermented. That's a stacking effect. So that's cool. But again, you want mainly cooked vegetables, very low carb, moderate protein, and high fat. So pretty much keto. And here it will say that. Electrolytes, you'll get these from the plants, and then and you want to intersperse small meals, preferably 3 of the day. You do not want to go, well, anything large is a very bad idea. And that's what all of this says. Polymeric is multiple foods, which is what we talked about. You want variety, definitely, because again, this is what you're going to be accustomed to, so you're setting yourself up for success. Also from a nutritional standpoint, but less so. It's good to have a variety. And then ghrelin is like grumble, it's like hunger. Leptin is like you've had enough. It actually is from thin. So okay. Marasmus is if you are very malnourished, and you're actually start going into a metabolic slowdown. And the reason these came up is if you are refeeding, you have more susceptibility, not only of not doing the fast, like without any symptoms, but of refeeding. It can be, you need to kind of even go slower is the best. So moving on. So for all these fasts, it seems like dry fast is a 1-to-1. So if you dry fast for 3, you want to refeed for 3. So you should not be eating a full meal until day 4. This is what, again, the empirical studies say. This is what some anecdotes say as well. With the water fast, it's 0.5. So if you're water fasting for, let's say, 5 days, 2.5 days you're getting back. Maybe on the 3rd day you need a full meal. With FMD, which is a fasting-mimicking diet, 5 days, it's a 1 to 0.25. So maybe the first day you can't, but the second day you probably can have a full meal. And then this is what we were talking about, how significantly less reactions if peanuts, eggs, milk was also in another study, but anytime you introduce it, seems like when the immune system is getting regulated, when the gut microbiome is up, pretty much being established, which happens right after a fast, this is when you introduce those foods. But let's keep going. So research on kids, what they do, they ask a lot of direct questions, 76 questions per hour of adult conversation. They're not afraid to try things. We'll get into this, but they sleep a lot. They do everything neuroplasticity. So laughter releases a bunch, like a chemical cascade that helps with neuroplasticity. So does sleeping a lot, and moving, which they all do way more, and curiosity, which they all do way more than adults. They also take risks, which is kind of helps in learning because of error and error correction. That's how more failures equal more learning, as long as the failures are not too costly. And they do this thing where they play, so that kind of lends them to the risk aspect. And they are also very much more emotive, so they're outwards facing, not inwards. And that's really cool, right? All of that, because they're pretty much learning machines that are very present in this world at all times. The only weird thing is they and we'll get into it here. Yeah, so this is what we talked about, and they like to touch, so it has to do with chi. They almost have more chi, which equals more growth, which children undergo, which is pretty cool. So And here we talked about a lot. They have a lot more vivid dreams, which is not surprising for REM to consolidate that memory. They have. And we talked about all of that. Yeah, one of the things they do this play pretend, which is interesting. So they imagine something in the world that's not there, and I bet they do it from everything we know, not as a way like a delusional way, but they do it in a way that kind of like a simulation. Say, well, what if that spoon wasn't there, or what if that, or what if I don't know, I had a partner that I could talk to. It seemed like it. And that develops that part of the brain rather than a delusional one, which is like, oh my god, it's there when it's not, or they're not actually present in the moment. It doesn't seem to be that. Here's what we talked about. It's pretty much ChatGPT, the introduction of food allergies. Here is, so how long to refeed? And there were some videos here. How long should I fast? A lot of the FMD works well if you cycle in and out. I think that's the best one with the best empirical data at the moment. You can do longer 200 calorie instead of 700 calorie, 200 calorie water fast. That go, usually the sweet spot seems to be around 2 weeks. 2 to 3 weeks is what this said, and then you rebuild at least for 2 to 3 weeks. So getting for the regeneration though for FMD is usually double. So for rats, FMD3 refeed 7, FMD3 refeed 7. For humans, looking at everything we know, the ideal would be FMD5 refeed 10, and in the middle of that refeed you get some glycogen boost. So your 5 FMD 10 refeed keto, and 2 of those days in the middle would be refeed with at least 150 grams of carbs, ideally, and it'd oscillate in a wave like that, and that would pretty much be what our ancestors evolved with, and that kind of cites this. So you definitely want to regen twice as much as you would fast, and so. And then here, and usually the first few days are critical because kind of what we spoke about, it is going to dictate what foods, and I can move this back, is going to dictate what foods take. If you have low inflammatory response, that's fantastic. How you rebuild, that's why you want to get proteins in earlier rather than later, but again, steady ramp up. This is the refeed. One critical note, it's great to have fermented food. So the best would be you refeed with everything we talked about, plus fermented foods. Cannot stress that enough. People had chronic nausea, people who had MCAS, when they did this for 5 days, FMD, and then they reintroduce, or even water fast, and reintroduce with fermented foods first as part of those veggies. Like a lot of them said they never had it, ever. So, which probably has to do with the gut microbiome leveling out. And the immune system, like relearning, like super accelerated rate. So that's awesome. This is everything we said. And here we talked about some of those that are pretty much, if you have any digestive disorder like acid insufficiency, things like that, BMI drop, significant drop, because you will drop a little, but significant drop, etc. That's when you should start. You will probably also see those signs that we talked about. So those are the red flags, but nothing. I think that's pretty much everything. And it says low fiber. If you, again, everything kind of slowly ramping, but nothing that we haven't already covered. Okay. Looking at these, pretty much summarize what we were talking about. He says no nuts and seeds, but then in Buchinger they do say nuts and seeds for protein. Definitely no cow dairy is a consensus there. But again, if you're reintroducing, the dose is the poison, or the dose is the solution in a better light. So if you go very small, especially if it's fermented, you're going to get the good guys in there. You're going to get your immune system to say, hey, it's okay. That's what the research shows as far as modulating the microbiome and the immune system. And I will be trying this shortly, so we'll see. That is what the data shows. This is an individual who does dry fast for a week, normally. Like, I think he does it for 108 hours, so close to a week. And he's fine. He does that and then eats OMAD meat. So I think if you work up to it, again, like anything, if it's gradual acclimation, like if you're lifting at the gym, if your life depends on lifting 200 pounds and if you never lifted, that's your life. You're done. But if your life depends on 200 pounds and you've been lifting for 3 years progressively, you can probably do it. So again, he's been fasting for, I think it's like 8 years now. So his system is very well adapted. And trained for that. Everything low and slow, and it goes. All that we talked about, so all the highlights we've talked about. Okay, I want to finish up with the diary, at least for the last 2 days, and we'll cover today's stuff later. Possibly. So, right, so fasting mimicking diet, the cool thing is you can differentiate cancer cells that were otherwise hidden, and also other things that hide from the BT cells like Epstein-Barr virus. They're now out in the open. You have more immune response, according to Dr. Gary Fatke. You have a lot more, like some measures, it's like 200-300% increase. So they will die. Also, you have any autoimmune or any cells that are defective will also be recycled. So that's why you have this crazy 20% cure of MS because for 3 months, and that's where 90% of the cells are replenished, you literally are making a new system. But you can only do that if you do a fasted state to trigger that type, what we talked about, mode 2. And almost everyone I know ever doesn't fast regularly like that. But if you do, evolutionarily that would make sense. We talked about that. Getting down low protein is important, so I cut out all seeds and nuts, which is interesting because in the wild you wouldn't have some nuts and seeds, and if you did, you would be at a caloric surplus, or at least sufficiency with a lot of protein. But if you don't, if you have leaves, you have water, you have electrolytes, but you're in this mode too. So it's almost like evolutionarily it's perfect, right? So compression is what I talked about. It's like moving everything inwards, like shoulder blades in, hip, like leg to hip in, everything kind of, you don't want anything hanging out, especially for like EDS, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, any inflammatory, that usually does not help. It hurts. That's actually how most injuries happen. This we talked about is just flexing muscles and nerves. And then microbiome. This is when I eat a lot of fermented foods. That's that dragon. I think we talked about it, but in the fasting mimicking diet, arguably all of these have gotten stronger, which is great. This is us conserving the flax, which is a seed, in the freezer to not lose it when I come back. So there was some sign of autophagy, some sunburns or some pains that I was having, and it could have been the endorphins, but they kind of subsided after 75 minutes of moderate endurance. Not fully, but they did subside. And again, could have been endorphins, could have been the sunlight that triggers a cascade of beta, some chemical that alleviates pain. But it also was weird that it, because I was out there before and it didn't do that. It was only with the exercise, that third variable. So, that happened. This is what we talked about. So we're going to include a lot of things on the refeed. If you're calming a flare and you're doing it something that won't induce another flare, like ACV has some yeasts that for people with Crohn's or sensitive to yeast might do another flare, but the cool thing is takes at least 2 and for me for sure 3 mouthfuls of like a ferment, like sauerkraut juice, to fully calm it down. I know if you're having stomach issues, I know most people say at least 2 tablespoons. I'd go with 3 mouthfuls. And you'll know because you start feeling very light, very good down there. It's great. Our ancestors typically smelled and tasted food a long time to see if it was bad before they would eat it. And that acclimates you to the food. In fact, with sensitivity testing, or like desensitization of allergies, that's what they do. They put like small peanuts underneath your tongue with a trained professional. They leave it there for a long time. So just in case acclimatization, you need to do that with foods longer, the better. That's why chewing more, they say chewing more releases more enzymes. Not that much more enzyme. Pancreas releases a lot more, stomach, etc. Bile. But chewing does keep the food in your mouth for longer, which sends the microbiome signals, which sends your own nervous system signals to say, hey, we like this. Don't react. This is what we talked about. Yep. Laughing is great, especially for calming food reactivity. Maybe something with the vagus and the chemicals released. Not sure though. It's very strong. Also for learning things and just not caring too much. It's almost like being a kid, which is fair. This started on day 2 of FMD, where you feel really, really good down there when you're doing cardiovascular exercise. So that's awesome. And you can taste food much better. And no, it's not just because you're hungry. It's just the taste is much better. I don't know how to say it. It's like more pure. It's like true. This is what we talked about. We talked about all this. This is if your nerves get stuck, if you're overextended, EDS, things like that. You can do nerve glides to get you back, but you want to do those nerve glides instead of keep going. Do not hold your mouth open at all. Most of our ancestors did not do that. Monkeys don't do that. Gorillas or apes don't do that because things get in your mouth, which are not good for you, like toxins, but also viruses. And I felt tickling in the back of my throat like I would normally when I would get sick. I noticed it during COVID, etc., and I coughed a lot to get it out over 30 minutes, and it works. It does, and you do like this pleasure tick on it, and it makes you cough more, and it worked. And then I closed my mouth, and I'm back to nose breathing. So smell, let's see, ACV, yeah, so ACV does have the yeast, we talked about that. So we're gonna just eat it in a compressed eating window. Laugh gives this love, pleasure, enjoyment, which we talked about, but a little different. It's a little stronger. And it teaches you things easier, which is kind of ties into the neuroplasticity we talked about for kids. Yeah, do not have music or any podcast, anything playing at night. You cannot sleep. Think About Nothing is easier when you don't have something going right next to you. And it's crazy. Like, you would yawn 5 times if it's off. If it's on, you never yawn. So when you're smelling, this is what we're doing now. If you smell or taste, and you have to actually focus on it, all the burping and farting you would have from a digestive episode turns into hunger pains. You actually start getting hungry. Even exercise feels good, like you feel light. Everything starts going inwards, like kind of taking prednisone is like anti-inflammatory. And outside, we always were smelling and tasting things all the time. And the sense of smell, maybe by a flare, gets cut off or dropped significantly. It's harder to get cut off when you're smelling things. So it's kind of like a lever or like a meter. The higher it stays high, or the more it stays high, the easier it is to stay high, and the harder it is to bring it down. So, and you have to go into kind of like a focus on things. I have a pineapple here next to me. I focus on it, and then you can really smell it. And there's layers to that, like levels, and you can smell more and more. Even a little bit at a lower layer resets everything, which is fantastic. Like, I'm not smelling now, and I feel great. So that is maybe the key to a flare reset. I mean, they happen outside, so we'll see. Sample size of 1, but it's pretty good. That's why we're researching this. Best smelling fruits. Okay. Yep, that's everything. And I think we talked about, and we can go here. This is what ChatGPT said for best smelling fruits, but I like Perplexity's answer, which is kind of get plants. This is why not to mouth breathe. You will regain most of the weight in about 3 to 5 days of FMD, 3 to 5 days, if you're at a caloric surplus. But the true fat loss, which ties into Walter Longo's studies on FMD, persists for months, which makes sense because his CRP ratings dropped per month. Like, they did not come back. And a lot of the metrics around fat drop per month. So this is probably the most right answer. Here, I would not follow this answer. It doesn't. It says it comes back. That's not true. If you want FOS for your good guys when you're refeeding, it's really chicory, Jerusalem have by far the most. Like, if you're looking at an actual practical quantity, the onion family has some. Yeah. And then you will colonize more because of what you feed them, and there is some lesser pancreatic enzymes, but there's still enough bile, like the same bile as not fast. So if you refeed, you will recolonize in a different way, stronger, just not because they're avoiding the stomach acid. And this says the same thing. Okay, cool. So that is everything. Hopefully that helped a lot.